Hey guys, today I'm going to be breaking down the entire creation process of the painting featured in my last video. The painting is called Mother's Hurting, so obviously there is some deep symbolism there. But before we get too much into it, I want to talk a little bit about the actual idea of the painting, the personal aspect of it. About a year and a half ago, I said something in a video to the effect of, my pieces have no meaning behind them, that I get inspired from random places. I really only paint what I like and what I think aesthetically looks good or aesthetically people will enjoy. And I still do that. But in the last few months, especially because of COVID and how much, we're all having such a hard time with COVID. I am still largely in lockdown with my kids, just having no time, and then also struggling a lot with postpartum depression. I feel like that has driven my artwork in a completely different direction. Not only am I creating more digital work, I like the crispness, I like the control, but not only that, I have been creating pieces that do have meaning and symbolism, and I've been very much using my artwork as an outlet strictly for my emotions, and that's where I'm getting my ideas right now. Whereas before, I think I got a lot more of my ideas from Pinterest, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. My whole thing before was I don't want to force a meaning onto the viewer. I want to put out a piece and I want people to interpret it the way they will. But now I still believe in that, but I really need my artwork right now. And even though I'm having a lot more good days than bad, there's some days I wake up and it's like there's an anvil on my chest, on my brain, and it's hard. It is really hard, and I'm really struggling. So this piece was a representation of that, obviously, or not obviously to everybody, but on the skull, there is the triple goddess symbol, which is a symbol that appears in neo-paganism, and it is a representation of the life cycle of a woman from maiden to mother to crone, and comparing that to the phases of the moon. The full moon in the center of the symbol is a representation of the motherhood, in a literal sense, that your belly is big and full of baby, and then also in a metaphorical sense, the fulfilling nature of motherhood for some women. So obviously my full moon, where I am right now in the phase of my life, I'm a mother. My moon is all sorts of messed up and cracked throughout the skull. And I tried to kind of work it so the cracks looked a bit like a family tree, just because I often feel fear and guilt that my depression is affecting my children. It's kind of impossible to not have your depression affect your children. And I desperately try to hide it, to hide the sadness that I feel some days. I try to hide it behind games and activities and distractions, but I think just inevitably children can sense when there's something wrong. And do I think my kids have a worse life for it? Absolutely not. But what I do think it does, and I have to remind myself of this, is I think it makes them empathetic, incredibly empathetic to and sensitive to other people's emotions. I do this with my kids. We do like an emotion check. How are we feeling? Like today, is everything good? Is this just kind of a, if you're sad, is it just a whatever day, or is it a little bit more serious? And we've done that for a long time, pretty much ever since DeBabes or Beanie could talk and communicate that. So on days that it is harder, I try to be positive. I try to keep going, but I think it makes Beanie really empathetic, especially on days when that like classic depression exhaustion kicks in, where you're just so tired, and I'm like, Mommy just needs to close her eyes for 2 minutes with the baby, and he's always so understanding and sensitive, but of course, you're gonna worry. So that is why the cracks kind of form a family tree. And then behind the skull are these beautiful blue flowers, from sadness, from blueness, bloom something beautiful. And even though I'm struggling, I feel like my artwork and my sense of accomplishment and my sense of self is actually stronger now, which 18-year-old me would be like, what? That's not what depression does. But that's what it's done for me now. And even though I struggle to have those good days, or I do feel like now I'm improving. But when I was struggling to have those good days, for some reason, I just had a much stronger sense of self. And I didn't, other than the occasional mom guilt, I didn't feel like, I don't know how to explain it. I felt bad about myself, but at the same time, I didn't. I feel like I know who I am. And I know where my life's headed. And right now, even though the world is shaking and things are just totally flipped upside down, I still feel like I have a very strong grasp on who I am, and who I am as a mother and all that. So that's why there's some color behind it. And then just same thing with these blue tears that look like an ocean, which is kind of this deep ocean inside of me, that though it's kind of sad and all-encompassing, just this large, an ocean is enormous, but at the same time, water kind of represents renewal, rebirth. And so that's me crying my please be better now tears. So yeah, I just put a lot of thought into this artwork, and it was just completely unrelated to the video, which happens all the time. So it's just because I don't make a lot of traditional artwork, and when I do, I spend a lot of time on it. And right now I have like no time because my kids can't go to daycare, so I'm stuck trying to work a full-time job and take care of a toddler and a baby, and it's like rough, and I'm not getting a lot of sleep. So it's not a lot of time, but I'm still making it work. But I'm also trying to keep my mental health in check, and a way to do that is to create artwork like this. So that is where the overall meaning came from. But the actual sketching process, finally, almost 10 minutes in, I started with a sketch on Procreate, and I've been doing this a lot lately. I feel like I kind of said before, making digital artwork, having a lot of control, instead of having to do the eraser. I've got, with Procreate, you tap with 2 fingers, Control Z, undo, which is a lot easier for me. And it's nice to have the reference right there, right next to what you're doing. So I found a reference of a skull tilted down, and I worked off of that piece, and then, pretty much just decided I would kind of wing it with the flowers in the background and hope for the best, which is, in retrospect, I kind of messed up in a couple places, but that's just how it went. After I got my sketch to my liking, I printed it out, and I used my light board to trace it onto the proper watercolor paper. And initially, I was actually going to try and use washi tape to mask off the skull so I could paint the flowers. But I feel like I always do that, and then I get like 2 pieces of tape in, and I'm like, I already hate this. I don't want to do this. What if I cut through the tape and cut into the paper? Like, what if I damage the painting or the liner? Like, I just wasn't having it. So I switched to masking fluid, or liquid frisket, as some like to call it. I get questions about this all the time. This is essentially just liquid latex that is safe for paper. You paint it on with a special tool, or in my case, I have like a special brush that I've molded because, it's liquid latex, so it would destroy any other brush. But I've molded over time, like it's a latex brush now, essentially. But that works best for me, and I lay that down, let it dry completely, and then I'm able to paint without worrying about transferring over onto where I don't want paint, which is on the skull. So I did that, and sometimes masking fluid can pull up your paper, but you just have to be careful. And I'll kind of show a clip here where I'm pulling away from the direction that I want my masking fluid to pull up, and that seems to be the best way to get it up without damaging the paper. Also, the longer you leave it dry on the paper, the harder it will be to get up. So, and I'm honestly one of those people that like, I'll leave it on for like 2 days because I don't usually finish that portion of a painting all in one sitting. I used to be able to do it, but now I have children, so there's no way. There's no fucking way. So I have to be very careful when pulling it up. When I started work on the just winging it flowers, let me rephrase that. I don't have a sketch laid down here, but I had a really rough thumbnail of what kind of flowers I wanted where. So I was winging it to an extent, but not really, because I did have an idea of the overall shape. But when I started work on the flowers, I decided that I wanted them to be very loose and unprecise. I wanted colors to run together. I wanted layers to not connect. So I wanted it to be kind of like the flowers were almost in your peripheral. I feel like at the end result, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, I did overwork the flowers to some extent, but specifically these little wispy purple guys are along the edges. I thought that that would help me record the footage a little faster if I was a little bit more footloose and fancy free with the way I was painting the flowers, because I knew they were going to be the most time consuming part of this, but also because I didn't want it to feel like the flowers were directly the center of your range of vision. I wanted it to feel like this idea that from sadness comes happiness is still a little out of reach for me. See, I just want you to know it is completely possible to be efficient, but still instill some meaning into your shortcuts, which I do a lot. Something I do to help add interest and to kind of thicken up my floral paintings is to add very light, translucent flowers in the background. Obviously, it is a rule of art that as you get farther away from your focal point, shapes become less defined. But I've taken that kind of rule and just the idea that I need to, like I'm building a bouquet kind of. The interesting bits can't all be right up in front. They have to kind of fill out as the piece is going back. And that's something that's really wonderful about watercolor as a medium, and something that I've always really enjoyed about it is the fact that it is a transparent medium, and that you can create these very, almost like you're looking at different colored cellophane. Like, it's just really unique and beautiful, especially when you play with your pigment to water ratio. And in this case, I used a lot more pigment than water. So as my brush strokes started to dry, the pigment started to spread out to the edges of the strokes, basically where the water was flowing. And then when it dries, you get this beautiful, like, crinkly, crunchy, like, edge to your watercolor painting. And I just think that's incredible. It's like looking at a rose petal that's starting to wilt or die, and the edges of the petal have more concentrated pigment because it's starting to shrivel. And I always felt like that was such a unique and beautiful quality that watercolors have above any other paint. And that's always attracted me to watercolors. Something I would do differently is probably be a little bit more loose with the flowers at the top of the skull. I kind of shot myself in the foot by outlining them. I ruined that crinkle effect that I was going for. If I did this over again, I think I would round out the petals a little bit more, make them softer, smoother. And then obviously the leaves down by the little blue puffball flowers, I would change completely. Definitely make them lighter, looser. But yeah, overall, I just kind of had fun with painting the florals around the skull. After I was finished with that, I moved on to the water. I laid down a very light base color, a very light blue. And then from there, I started blocking in these kind of amorphous, blobby shapes. I let those dry. And then within those shapes, I added even darker, amorphous, blobby shapes. It's kind of hard to explain, but visually, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I actually really enjoy painting water in this way as a kind of a means to distract myself. It requires a certain level of focus and precision, so you kind of have to turn your brain off to everything else in order to really focus on the task at hand. So I find it helps a lot when you're feeling anxious or upset or stressed out about something. And now here at the end, I'm going to ink my drawing with these Pentel brush pens. Brush pens are really tricky and they take a lot of practice to get right. I am still really far off from getting it right, but I've kind of been in the mood to use them lately. And really the trick with them is just some level of quickness and swiftness to your strokes. If you go too slow, you will definitely mess up. But on the flip side, if you go too quickly, you will also mess up and maybe overshoot your shot, if that makes sense. And I'm just like way too chicken shit to do the fine details with the brush pens, even the small sized brush pens. I'm just way too, I couldn't do it. So I grabbed my Micron pens to do the fine details. After I added those details with my Micron, I went in with my Kuretake White Ink 30, which is a little pot of very pigmented white permanent paint. And I didn't film this part because I suck, but I just went in and added a few little details, mainly the stamen on the flowers on the top of the skull, and after that, I was done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to bring the energy down just a little bit, make it a little bit calmer, a little bit more relaxing, a little bit more educational, a little bit more personal and open. I'm talking low like this, not only because I wanted to bring the energy down in the video, but also because I have 2 sleeping children on the floor above me, and I didn't want to risk waking them up because that would be a nightmare because it's currently almost 2 a.m. So thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to stay out of trouble. See you guys later.